My learning experience will start in my home area in Western Kenya for the next few weeks. Consult, seek advice, but also seek blessings. On the basis of these, I'll come back to the national stage where I intend then to formally declare the start of a campaign to seek to be the 5th President of the Republic of Kenya.
Our big interview is up next. Now, he landed in the country from Geneva, Switzerland in February 2021 and hit the political landscape with the announcement of his intention to run for president next year. He arrived to a warm reception that included an airport to city center roadshow, ending with a press conference that formally declared his presidential bid. But some say not much has been seen or heard of Dr. Mukhisa Kituyi since then. And the former UNCTAD Secretary General and former cabinet minister joins us on the program this evening. Dr. Mukhisa Kituyi, many thanks for joining us on Newsnight.
Thank you very much for having me.
I want to begin by just querying you on your arrival. Now, you came in January, colorful arrival. We saw that roadshow, that aggressive campaign that you promised, you would roll out, but we haven't heard much from you after that. I want to begin by hearing from you, Dr. Kituyi, on where you've been.
I've been around. I've been to many places in Kenya, but you might remember that the week after my homecoming, there was an announcement and declaration of a lockdown. That was the start of the pandemic and encouragement for leaders to avoid having super spreader events like rallies. I have responded to that not just as obeying a government request and advisory from the Ministry of Health, but as a responsible citizen. I try as much as possible to draw attention to the reality that we have COVID in this country. So my initial plan of having larger rallies had to give way. In the meantime, I have fashioned more focused focal group meetings. I've had meetings of between 20 and 30 people in all constituencies of Kwale County, for example, all constituencies of Mombasa County, in Kilifi, in Bungoma. These past 5 days I've been in Kakamega and Trans Nzoia. 2 weeks ago, I was in Nandi and Western Gishu. So they may not be big news on TV, but the ability to reach out to opinion leaders and influencers and present to them who is Kituyi beyond Nairobi and the media has been an important activity going on while I'm respecting the reality of COVID.
Well, I mean, I think we're still trying to cover every presidential candidate as they go out there. We even had cuts of you earlier today, and I'll talk to you a bit about that later on. But is that an indication that you still want to be the country's next commander-in-chief?
Well, I am formally going to do that announcement. Remember I said
yes,
that there are the preliminaries to be completed, including completion of party issues and starting to grow a direction of engagement with other politicians, and I am going to make that announcement.
I'm curious, on which political party?
Yeah, that's the party will announce when announcing, before I announce my candidature.
You were here 3 months ago. It was still a secret then. It's still a secret now. Why?
You don't launch a party during COVID. You don't want to launch a party.
Others are launching,
COVID.
Dr. Kituyi.
Yeah, let them do that, but we are coming. We are fine.
Okay, what is the party? What is it about? Is it... Give us an indication that...
Okay, our party is not one individual, but the kind of party we are fashioning has to reflect the kind of Kenya we aspire to. We see our responsibility not only to be alive to the challenges of today, and the challenges of today, first and foremost, are the existential challenges to a lot of young people. The largest important constituency for us politically as a nation is how do we get sustainable money into the pockets of young people. And that's about jobs. Forget about a lot of other big words we use. Get jobs to young people. You are having threats that are translating into mental health problems because of the declining hope of a livelihood. That has to be a core basis of attention. Secondly, we are in the middle of a very, very challenging situation. As a country, we have regional issues that have to inform our thinking as regional leaders. You are seeing the unraveling of the state in Ethiopia, the Ethnic Federation of Ethiopia. The recent unturned agreement between the Oromo Liberation Front and the Tigrinian Liberation Front poses a very, very substantial threat to a disintegration, which will mean Kenya can anticipate tens of millions of refugees. Are we preparing ourselves for this? Today, as we speak about tens of millions of refugees, we're seeing the famine in northern Kenya. It is not as exciting as the political meetings between caucuses, but Kenyans are really dying because there's no food. There's a reality that many rural populations, I mean, when I visited people in the villages, what am I hearing? Our limited savings have gone into paying bills for COVID-sick people in hospitals. We now have no capacity even to send people into hospitals in critical condition. These are challenges that have to fashion our short-term plans. I say that because, interestingly, you heard Equity Bank is making dramatic gains on its returns as the economy sorts out for the bigger boys. But the reality is a stimulus that looks at the most vulnerable. Is
what you feel is an important solution at this time?
It's a critical issue that has to inform sound politics today.
I think
and we are paying attention to that, paying attention to what is it that ails the agricultural sector. What can be salvaged of the collapsing small enterprises? These are the daily issues that are obsessing us as we try to say what is unique about our political direction.
Okay. Daktari, and I ask you this because it is clear that you have a grasp of the issues that are affecting the country, and that one there's no doubt about it. But there's a question that I must ask you this evening as a presidential candidate, and you said today that you still are that. Daktari, in late June, a video circulated allegedly depicting you in a compromising position. This evening, Daktari, I want to ask you this. Are there personal integrity questions that could jolt your bid for the presidency?
I believe personal integrity issues are important in the choice of leaders across the board. Yes.
So how should Kenyans judge you this evening?
Kenyans should judge me.
Questions about your personal integrity?
Kenyans should judge me on the basis of my integrity and judge me on the basis of how I deal with felt national challenges. Do I compromise the security and integrity of my country? That is the basis of being judged by Kenyans.
Okay. You don't want to comment on whether the video was authentic or not this evening?
I don't want to go to lower the debate of my candidature below my neck. The assets I want to bring to this are: who is Kituyi? What does he stand for in this country? I will sustain a campaign nationally throughout of dignity and respect even for my opponents. Okay. And that's about as much as I want to say about that.
Okay, because finally one publication said you are blaming political enemies for that. Is there any truth to that?
That is a manufactured story. I have not given any such statement to any media outlet or any individual whatsoever.
And that's all you're going to say on that?
That is the truth, and that's what I want to say.
Okay. Daktari, we know you've had a busy day today. We saw you with Justin Muturi. We saw you with Professor Kivutha Kibwana. There's talk of a coalition for change. What is that all about?
I have not mentioned or any of the people I had lunch with today about the coalition for change. But there is a certain truth. This is a season of seeking out, sounding out different players. Is the direction of work the same as yours? Do they stand for the same things that you espouse as a politician? Do you have any shared history? Now, I mentioned this when I had first been asked questions after my meeting with Professor Kibwana and Raila Odinga at the Radisson Arboretum. And that exercise of looking out for people with whom we might share a sense of purpose and we might share a sense of record has to continue. And so for all the three of us and for others that will be meeting away from TV cameras, we are looking for, can we make sense in Kenya politics beyond a reenactment of politics of the past?
How long will you be having these discussions for before there's a clear way forward? Because some would have said, you know, there's a hope that by now we would know whether Mukhisa Kituyi is the presumptive presidential candidate of this party or of this coalition. But for now, it's like we're being taken around in circles by a man that you know, came with great promise.
I usually expect that most political formations not representing a candidate that is a repeat candidate end up with a candidate about 6 months before the election. So I don't think there is any hurry in that. We are at a stage where we have to make sense. What is our relevance in the transitional period? What is it we stand for? Is there any distance between what we stand for and what others stand for? And can that be taken to the political market, to the Kenyan electorate? At that stage, you're not looking of who is the leader. You don't deal with the most difficult questions up front. Ask NASA.
Okay, ask NASA. And when you look at the state of our democracy, Dr. Kituyi, 30 years or so after the second liberation and the advent of multipartyism, we still can't seem to get it right in the state of our political parties. Political parties are formed as special purpose vehicles. They are here today, they are gone tomorrow. Does that disappoint you? Does that concern you?
In a way, it does, because mature, stable, long-surviving political parties should be curious of a sense of ideals. This is the direction to go. You can pass on to the next generation. But the high mortality, the high fatality rates of Kenyan political parties erases that tradition. And it is true that many formations, I mean, since the year 1997, there is no change of government there is no party which has won 2 elections since 1997. And that's a statement that. But you see, the thing is also, it's important to say, the second liberation is not a point in history. It's a process that was intensified in the early 90s. Some of its gains are reflected in the Constitution of 2010. But there's a lot of work that has not been completed from that campaign. Part of the second liberation was a purposeful fight against a society that is so chained to corruption. But what we have seen, some of the heroes of the anti-corruption struggle get into positions and they become the new messiahs of corruption. You call them messiahs of corruption? The patron saints. And all of a sudden, we celebrate how much money we are able to spend in campaigns, as if that is what liberation and the struggle was all about. I think this country's second liberation is not complete until we put hope, prosperity, and inclusion back at the center of politics, until we redeem respect for human dignity. When you see an innocent young man is shot dead because it's the wrong place, or because whoever is shooting can get away with it, you should not be satisfied that you're living in a democratic society. And I think those are some of the challenges that we have to face. The voiceless out there need a voice, and democracy should guarantee that voice as part of national liberation. I'm
actually told we have some questions, so shortly we'll be putting that up. But I think I want to hear from you on this, and you know, you're explaining your vision for the country, but in this country it seems to make it to State House, you cannot do it alone. Who are you looking to work with, Dr. Kituyi?
I am looking to associate with people.
Can we be a bit more specific?
No, I cannot start enumerating. I'm looking to associate with this person and this person.
Are there those whose ideals you share, for example? I am specific
about certain ideals. We must put corruption in the front burner. You know, Kenya, after the coming election, will have to answer questions. Why is it that made in Kenya cannot sell internationally? The cost of made in Kenya increases because we top up with the cost of corruption. Every corrupt act is built into the final product's price. Every bureaucratic red tape and distortion and rent-seeking behavior adds to the cost of made in Kenya. And if you really genuinely believe in recovering better after COVID, you must look for making made in Kenya competitive, improving the productivity of labor, reducing the hidden taxes, rationalizing even mainstream taxes, but importantly, slaying the monster that is holding us down and ridiculing our competence.
Okay, since you won't tell me who you're hoping to work with moving forward.
I'm hoping to work with people who share that sense.
Is there anyone you're not ready to work with?
Yes.
Who is that?
Any person who has a clear recent history that they are cerebrally corrupt.
The last time I hosted you here, you said a majority of the political class you are limiting your options.
I think they are not very cerebral. I mean, there are some you cannot cleanse. I think those you should not even try to think about coalescing together. There are redeemable cases, but the understanding has to be that from day one, this is a government that will be committed to zero tolerance of corruption. Not vindictive, but exhausting existing cases in court with the cooperation of the court and making corruption painful.
Dr. Let me pick some feedback. 2242 is the SMS line. Hashtag is Newsnight. Sam Musumba. What's Mukhisa Kituyi cooking on his just proclaimed 2022 presidential bid? Is he working in the background to popularize his bid for the country's top job? What will he offer that's different from others? Okay, thanks Sam Musumba for that. Let's take a look at another one. Ombati Francis says, Mukhisa, welcome to try his luck. He's equal to the task. Okay, you seem to have one vote there. Kisika Nathan, you say it's high time that these politicians stand out and speak what exactly they always promise to deliver and how they will deliver. I'm watching the broadcast from Nanyuki. Engineer Lazaro Kanyambok, many presidential hopefuls are still waiting for a possible rerun between the front runners. That's why people like Dr. Kituyi are reluctant. Okay. Michael, he's not beating around the bush. Dr. Kituyi is just a political project like any other. He's taking too long to open up. All right? And I think we have one more. Engineer Mohammed Dida, you say Dr. Kituyi is endowed with technical and functional capacity to develop and direct transformative ideas. But technical capacity to direct doesn't mutate into political capacity to lead. Mukhisa will serve Kenya best as a think tank, not as president. Maybe you start with that. Maybe you address
that last
engineer.
Question. You might want to remember that Kenya's first cabinet at independence contained the most educated Kenyans. What does that mean? That the country celebrated independence knowing that political leadership can be brought out by people who have a sense of where the world is going and ascribe to policies that try to drive Kenya in that direction.
You said
to get to a point where you say clever people should think for leaders is a self-depreciation. You're diluting your own sense of worth. Our society tries to look for the best as its leaders. I remember what Bill Clinton said when he picked Al Gore to be his running mate. He said, many people have told me that I'm clever, but I've looked around for a person I believe to be cleverer than me, to be complementing my competences in offering the best for my country. At a time like this, Kenya needs to put its best foot forward. Not just because you can mouth cliches that you have heard are popular, but you have a sense of understanding. What does it take? How has it worked? And in my work on development around the world, I found some of the clearest, foresighted leaders who have led governments from Singapore to Barbados have been persons who have personally grown to understand the key challenges, and they invite their citizens to say, I don't think and I don't want to pretend I know everything, but my knowledge with your political support can help me unlock solutions to our country.
Dr. Kituyi, some would say that works very well in countries that are more homogeneous, but in a country like Kenya where our 40-something plus tribes really puts out the country as a grouping of tribes, that for any presidential candidate who's serious about their bid, one, they need to have the finances, two, the networks, three, maybe the tribal backing, that those are the factors that will really go into a presidential election.
I totally agree.
I'm not saying what you're saying isn't good, but
totally agree
reality.
That ethnic diversity is a reality of our country. But Kenya's ethnic diversity is not ethnic strife. I have known countries with ethnic strife. I've known countries where the ethnic barrier is a major drain to national integration. But I don't see a large number of tribes as a reason to devalue the educational level of leaders. Perhaps, in fact, a diverse country like Kenya is the best ground for informed leaders who appreciate the beauty in diversity, who can know the greatness of a Cabra and celebrate the Rendile without creating friction and animosity about who stole whose camels. That knowledge is important. It is not the know-it-all, but it can contribute, if used with humility, to produce a good leader. The arithmetics of how to win elections is true. It needs money, it needs tactic, it needs alliance building. Those all are in consideration, and nobody can be a serious candidate without taking those. But an ability to say, I know best practice. I've seen how it has worked. I've advised presidents and it has worked. And I want to put that experience and knowledge at the disposal of my citizens, my countrymen and women.
Nobody doubts that, Dr. Kituyi. I mean, one newspaper article had this quote, Kituyi yet to find footing in local politics. What are you going to do over the next 1 year that is sort of so impactful you haven't done over the last 6 months that Kenyans will say, of everyone that is asking to be president, and a lot of names are being put out there, Dr. Kituyi is the one?
All right, I think that is the challenge of the campaign period when it opens up. But if you say, let me give you an example. Last Sunday, I was touring Kakamega County. After meetings with the MCA aspirants and some parliamentary aspirants, I had a meeting with the leaders of the border community. At the end of that meeting, the leader of the border community donated to me a prize bull that can easily be valued at 80,000 shillings. In the normal Kenyan run of politics, borders meet you and say, leave us na kitu kidogo. But this is a situation where they say, we appreciate you. You are a symbol of our prize fighter, and this is our gift to you to encourage your campaign. There's a statement out there that other values might also matter to people, that we have just not unlocked them. And that let us find ways of reaching to those people, talking a language they understand, showing empathy about the pain they suffer. They will not extort from us. They will say, let us work with you, let us own your candidature. And that's the kind of campaign that I'm looking to open up as the country opens up.
Dr. Kituyi, before we switch gears and talk economic models, I want you to respond to the other two questions. One was, are you anyone's project? Was that the promise you were given when you came back from Geneva?
I have had that question asked a number of times. Of course, the simple and straightforward answer is no. I could not resign a prestigious international job to come to be somebody's project. Project for what purpose?
It was more guaranteed rather than coming out to sort of start afresh.
No. I have said that very clearly. I am not anybody's project. And if I was anybody's project, it would have been visible by now.
Are you willing to be?
Of course not.
A project. If I
want to be a project of the Kenyans who aspire to return values of inclusion, empathy, targeting the most vulnerable among us, really resuscitating hope among youth that they can live their dreams again, that Kenya can create opportunity. I want to be the project of those kind of people.
Dr. Before I take a look at more feedback, let me ask you this, because you have served in the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and I know with your stint at UNCTAD, you had a lot of time to look at various economic models that are being used around the world. We're in a season not just of coalitions, but of economic models, and every party, every candidate is selling one economic model after the other. Maybe I should start by asking you, what's your offering this evening? Which economic model should we tie to Dr. Kituyi?
I don't think Kenya's problem is what economic model. Even the things you're calling models are not models, are approaches. To my mind, the problem, the challenge of Kenya is not a rivalry between economic models. The primary challenge of Kenya is what is a sustainable way of putting money into the pockets of the people. From the farmer to the university and technical college graduating young man and young woman, to the worker who lost their job because of factories migrating to Dar es Salaam, to the tour guide who saw a phenomenal pain coming because of the disruptions by COVID of the hospitality industry. Those people's problems are not suited into an economic model in the way we are using that word loosely. What I know, it is true. A struggling economy coming back from difficult times has to target action at the grassroots. And it's not action of collecting money and promising that I'll give money to young people and then they'll become entrepreneurs and then they'll grow the economy. I'll give you the example we did when we were in Kibaki's government. One of the first acts of the Kibaki government was to use state money and buy back Kenya cooperative creameries from the people who had stolen it from the farmers. We knew it was painful because it had been stolen, but we paid above its price to get it back and use it to guarantee minimum price for farmers, dairy farmers' produce, and build back the dairy industry on the base of that. To me, that is a process of targeting the base to build resilience and go upwards. I wouldn't call it an economic model. Similarly, a challenge of Kenya today is how can we compete with neighboring countries in attracting greenfield foreign direct investment. That has to be the cost of doing business in Kenya, the transparency of those who make decisions, the time of deciding on investments, the absence of corruption and 10%, those things cannot be addressed by simply saying this is my economic model. So to me, make Kenya a competitive economy.
What I'm curious
Put
about...
money in the pockets of the young people through new investment opportunities.
It sounds very simple, but what I'm curious about, and no one is quite telling Kenyans, is how you're going to deal with our nearly 1 trillion shilling deficit or debt, if you look at it. Everyone's talking about putting money in the pockets of young people, but nobody's telling us how we are going to deal with the hole in our budget.
I don't think I've had any interview on television where I've not talked about the debt challenge.
How will you balance repaying
There are a number
debt
of things.
And
we have to accept one thing. One of the reasons why I say helicopter money for the poor is not a sustainable solution after the next election is because we are going into a challenging time with very limited exchequer issues because of debt service, which is growing exponentially right now as we talk. The first thing we'll have to do is tame the appetite to live beyond our means. We have no choice about this. It can look good to have glittering new infrastructure projects, but we cannot afford to grow at that rate of infrastructure investment. This is beyond the ability of Kenyan taxpayers to sustain. That is one level. But a second level is this. I was part of the team that was arguing, and Kenya eventually came on board but came late. I was one of the 5 leading proponents from the developing world for the debt service suspension initiative, which has included Kenya recently. We saved some money.
Right.
Unfortunately, the Chinese twisted us recently and said, you cannot apply that on our projects, otherwise will not finance the ongoing projects. And we said to the IMF, we don't want to apply this to China. But it's just a statement of our vulnerability to certain donors or loaners and the reality of limited options for government. What does it mean? We are going to face down a very acute structural adjustment future being dictated to us by IMF in the next few years, downsizing the civil service, privatizing public corporations, reducing the positions at public universities. These are realities we're going to deal with. So I'm not cheating anybody that we can run away from this deficit. But I also say this, since infrastructure has been paid for and built expensively, instead of sitting back and crying that this infrastructure was too expensive, we must find a way of justifying its existence by optimizing the use of that infrastructure. You know, SGR has just been like the British colony.
I was about to ask you SGR, how are you going to optimize the SGR?
But look at what the British did a century ago. They built a railway and then looked for farmers to come and raise revenue for financing that railway. So we are repeating the mistake of the British colonial state 100 years ago. But I don't want us to sit there and be whipping ourselves and scratching our heads that SGR was expensive. It's expensive, it's on our books, but it's now our responsibility in perpetuity. The next challenge has to be, how can we reduce the cost of keeping this infrastructure by investing in utilizing its capacity? Where we now have standard railway, build feeder railway lines like it's being done by the Kenya Army and NYS. I appreciate this very much. But build productivity in the countryside so that we utilize this transport infrastructure in a gainful way.
So are you saying this evening that whereas some economic minds have said the SGR is something that any president moving forward might need to relook at, you feel there's a way to make it profitable, or at least...
You don't have any chance to look at it like you want to tear it down or refuse to pay the debt that we incurred. Unfortunately, we carry both the burden of an expensive debt compared to others who build a similar railway, but also an expensive discount that went into the pockets of politicians. You saw every other person constructing high-rise building because they knew the railway was coming. They tear it down and pay him. That is money moving from the taxpayer to the greedy individuals. We will have to carry that burden. But instead of just crying that there was corruption, it's a point in time where we say the infrastructure is there. It's a reality. We reduce the pain of the Kenyan taxpayer by investing in productivity to utilize what is already invested in.
Dr. Kituyi, we've had economists on this show as recently as 2-3 months ago who feel that the rate at which we're moving, our growing debt obligations, and our, I guess some would say, the lack of growth in our revenue as had been expected, that 2-3 years from now, our economy could actually ground to a halt. Do you hold a similar view?
If we don't take certain substantial steps and decisions, we run a risk of a collapsed economy because of the exponential growth of public debt in this country. And that's why, for me, I was saying we have to call time on unsustainable expansion of infrastructure investment, whether it is dams or railways or dualized roads. We have a limited capacity to keep sustaining that expansion. But there's a second thing I'm saying. You know, I see a lot of people in our country thinking that development is expanding the tax that is collected by the state and then distributing it through the devolved government for the devolved governments to operate things. And I think this is not a model that will recover this economy. To me, development is money in the pocket of the entrepreneur investor that creates employment and creates value, much more than expanding how much money is collected by the state for distribution. Development does not come from state distribution. Development comes from entrepreneurial investment. And unless we change that thinking, our sense of devolution that it's going to bring development because we'll increase how much money is sent to the devolved government without tightening the leakages in financial architecture at the devolved level, without thinking about sucking money from the taxpayer, which he can now not put into enterprise but has to pay it into government corpus, is not a model of sustainable recovery from the crisis in which we are, and does not help postpone the day of reckoning because of the mushrooming public debt.
Dr. Kituyi, and before I take a look at some more feedback, I know we have some more tweets and I'll be reading your SMSs as well. 22422 is the SMS line, hashtag Newsnight. I must get your thoughts on this. US President Joe Biden has said it's time to look at how we can have a bottom-up approach, middle class, expand your middle class and have that bottom-up approach. Here, we know a section of the political class are talking about the bottom-up economic model, specifically those who support Deputy President William Ruto. What is your take?
I've said before that I like more to say what I think we need to do than critiquing what others are saying at this stage. But having said that,
I'm asking you to critique this evening, Dr.
It's not Biden, it is Obama who said to get away from supply-side economics, that if you give more money to the rich business people, they will expand production and therefore create more employment and benefit for workers, and the middle class grows. And it was proved not to be true, because if you look at what President Trump did, exempt the rich from taxes, increase the money in their possession. What did they do? They bought back the shares they had sold on the equity markets. They did not expand the enterprises. They consolidated their gains within the enterprise. They did not create new jobs. So saying bottom-up process, not as an economic model or policy, was to say target the lower middle class, the lower income groups by softening the possibilities of their livelihoods. It has more return on creating jobs and growing the economy than making the richest top bracket in the country richer. So that is a standard practice. Even in the UN family, we say there's this position that if you spread manure and water at the stem, the nutrients down there will sprout into new flowers on the tree. We don't call it an economic policy, we just call it a process of dispersing disposable resources, that the best returns on such investment. The most successful example of that is what Thaksin Shinawatra, the Prime Minister of Thailand, did in 1997 after the Russian crash, the Asian financial crisis, that public resources were most put into cooperatives to expand production by the producers, which will then be sucked up by entrepreneurs to be used as reinvestment capital. So we're not inventing anything new here. It's just that we have not been using it in Kenyan politics. But having said that, it is not a panacea, it's not a solution.
That was going to be my question. Is it whichever way you call it, process approach, is it a
Kibaki used that, as I explained, in the revival of cooperative movement, both coffee, tea, and in dairy. And any step I make forward, I believe very strongly you cannot revive small-scale agriculture in Kenya today without reinventing extension workers, reinventing farmer cooperative movement, building around the successful cooperative savings, but more cooperatives for inputs and for marketing. So this is part of building the base. but it's not promising them free helicopter money, that I'll give them money and then they will start enterprise. Youths are not looking for starting enterprise, they are looking for employment. And let us have a model of employment, but also allows for entrepreneurs to grow.
Dr. Ari, let me read some tweets. We take our break, we come back, I give you a chance to respond, and we're going to have to wrap it up there. Let's see what we have. This is what's coming in. I'm also trying to open my iPad here and read the SMSs. Mr. T. Manyara, you say Kenyan politics is changing. People are more enlightened. 2022 will be a surprise to many. Kenyans are ready to vote in leaders who will juxtapose politics of ideas, policies, and ideology against politics of tribe and deceit. That's from T. Manyara. Prince Dan Senior, you say, which way, Mukhisa? What is your model? Bottom up, trickle down economics, unemployment. What difference will your government make or do? All right. Charles Karis, you say, if the election was about the economy, then Dr. Mukhisa Kituyi is not only the better option, but the best option. However, he begins with an if there, Dr. Kituyi, if it was just about the economy, and I'll ask you that. Mtetezi Mkubwa, you say, ask Dr. Mukhisa if he has any agenda concerning the youth factor on employment and even inclusion in his government. I'm watching from Kisumu. Okay, last one. Ego Henry, you said Dr. Kituyi has bright ideas on the economy, fighting corruption and improving livelihoods. He has to be firm and direct, however, on his political journey and alliances. All right, Dr. I want you to think about that. Let's take that short break. We'll be back shortly. We get some of his feedback. I've got a few more questions, and I'll be reading your feedback as well. Keep it Newsnight 2 to 4 is the SMS line. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.